While $10,000 is the first milestone you should shoot for in your financial journey, I really think at $20,000, that's when your life really starts to change even more. This milestone is more about the acceleration of wealth, and you also benefit from the freedom to choose between staying at a toxic job or finding something better, becoming part of the investor class, and more. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I will share some actionable tips on how to save your first $20,000 if you aren't there quite yet. The reason this number changes you is not because $20,000 turns you into a different species of person, and not because it gives you some glamorous version of freedom that the internet likes to package as yachts, penthouses, or permanent vacation. It changes you because below a certain cash threshold, your nervous system does not experience life as a strategic game. It experiences life as threat management. You check your bank account and your brain is operating in pure survival mode. Every bill is not just a bill, it is a possible breach in the hull. Every small inconvenience is not an inconvenience. It is a potential chain reaction. A parking ticket can become an overdraft. An overdraft can become missed payment. A missed payment can become a credit hit. A credit hit can become a higher borrowing cost. A higher borrowing cost can become a delayed move, a trapped job, a trapped relationship, a trapped identity. When you have no margin, your brain becomes a machine for scanning danger. That is what scarcity does. It narrows perception, shortens time horizons, and turns even smart people into reactive decision makers. This is why so many people think they are bad with money when what is really happening is far more clinical and far less moral. Under severe financial stress, your brain is flooded with urgency. You are not making choices from clarity. You are making them through cortisol-driven fear. You are not evaluating trade-offs in a calm, rational way. You are trying to survive the week, then the month, then the next unexpected hit. The person who pays too much for convenience, who stays too long in a bad job, who takes on debt at terrible terms, who never seems to get ahead, is often not displaying a character flaw. They are displaying the biological consequences of operating without a neurological safety net. They are trying to make long-term decisions with a brain that has been trained by instability to focus on immediate relief. Once you understand that, the whole conversation changes. You stop framing savings as a spreadsheet exercise and start seeing it as a forensic accounting of the psyche. You realize that cash is not only purchasing power, it is cognitive power. It is the ability to think one move ahead instead of 1 hour ahead. It is the ability to say no without panicking about what happens next. It is the ability to evaluate a job offer, a city, a relationship, a business idea, a negotiation, or a risk with your prefrontal cortex fully online instead of with your nervous system pinned to the wall. That is why the purpose of your first serious savings target has been badly explained to most people. You were told it was for emergencies, for flat tires, for rainy days, for the occasional appliance failure. That framing is too small. It is technically true, but psychologically incomplete. If you believe savings is just a flat tire fund, you will always resent it. You will see every dollar in the account as a dollar not being enjoyed. You will feel like you are denying yourself life in order to prepare for mechanical inconvenience. That is a weak emotional case, and your brain knows it. But if you understand that this money is walking away money, everything changes. Walking away money means you can leave the job that is quietly dismantling your self-respect. It means you can survive the gap between one lease and another, one employer and another, one version of yourself and the next. It means your boss's bad behavior is no longer backed by the silent threat of your ruin. It means you do not have to accept every insult wrapped in a paycheck. It means you can negotiate with a straighter spine because the consequences of no are no longer catastrophic. That is why $20,000 matters so much more than people realize. For many people, it represents roughly 3 to 6 months of living expenses, and that range is where something profound happens. The constant background hum of danger begins to lower. The brain stops using all of its bandwidth on catastrophe prevention. You finally have a cognitive release valve. The immediate threat of ruin loosens its grip. The future stops feeling like a hallway that is collapsing while you run through it. You can sit still long enough to think. You can compare options. You can endure short-term discomfort because you know one bad week will not erase you. The money is in the account, but the real transformation is in your mind. You become less desperate, and desperation has been one of the most expensive forces in your life. Desperation signs bad contracts. Desperation renews bad leases. Desperation keeps broken cars on the road too long, and then finances replacements at terrible rates. Desperation says yes to overtime that destroys your health because the alternative feels fatal. Desperation interprets every ask from the world as a command. $20,000 does not eliminate pain, but it lowers desperation enough that you can re-enter your own life as an active participant. This is the part people miss when they repeat the myth that you need millions to feel free. That myth is demoralizing because it confuses total liberation with meaningful leverage. Of course, a very large portfolio creates a broader range of options. But your life does not wait for $1 million to begin changing. Psychological freedom arrives in gradients, and one of the first major gradients shows up when you have enough cash to create space between an external threat and your internal collapse. You do not need a private jet to think clearly. You need time, margin, and the removal of panic from your daily operating system. You do not need infinite money to stop tolerating obvious nonsense. You need enough money that your boundaries no longer feel like a luxury item. This is why the 20,000 threshold is so powerful. It is the point at which saving stops being passive defense and starts becoming active leverage. It is not just a cushion, it is a bargaining chip in every area of life. You become harder to exploit because your need is less visible. And when need becomes less visible, your value in the market tends to rise because calm people negotiate better, interview better, and choose better. This is not motivational fluff. It is cause and effect. The worker with zero runway cannot easily reject bad terms. The worker with runway can. The employee with no cash buffer experiences employment as dependency. The employee with cash reserves can experience it as a transaction. That distinction alone can change your income trajectory more than most minor optimization hacks ever will. Now add the mathematics, because the psychological story is only half of it. Wealth building feels impossible at the beginning because the first phase is brutally manual. You are doing almost all the work. If you save your first $20,000 through discipline, sacrifice, and consistent investing, it may take you 19 months of concentrated effort. Those 19 months feel slow because they are slow. You are carrying the entire system on your back. Every contribution is yours. Every skipped purchase is yours. Every boring automatic transfer is yours. The machine is barely helping. And because the machine is barely helping, the process creates the illusion that all future progress will feel exactly like this. That is the linear slog illusion. It tells you that if the first stretch felt like crawling through wet concrete, then the next 10 stretches will feel the same. But that is not how compounding behaves. Once you have 20,000 working for you, your second 20,000 often comes faster. Maybe the first took 19 months and the second takes 17. Why? Because now your own contributions are no longer alone. Your capital has joined the labor force. Interest, dividends, returns, and market growth are finally large enough to matter in a way you can feel. At first, compounding looks unimpressive because the base is too small. 5% on $1,000 is $50. That does not alter your life. 5% on $20,000 is $1,000. Suddenly, a month of progress does not rely solely on your sacrifice. The account begins to participate. The slope starts to tilt in your favor. This is the inversion point. Below it, you are mostly preserving, defending, stabilizing. Above it, you can begin seeking, building, allocating, and accelerating. Below it, your effort is consumed by protecting yourself from collapse. Above it, a portion of your effort can be redirected toward opportunity. That shift matters because opportunity requires surplus attention. A person in pure survival mode cannot properly evaluate exponential acceleration because their entire system is trained on interruption control. They are trying to keep life from breaking. But once the emergency frequency decreases, you can ask different questions. Not how do I make it through this month, but where can my next raise come from? Not how do I stop the bleeding, but what asset can I buy? Not how do I avoid disaster, but what skill compounds my earning power? Not how do I hold on, but what do I build? This is the real moment you begin entering the investor class, and that phrase sounds more dramatic than it is. It simply means that some percentage of your money starts working even while you do not. Your identity shifts from full-time earner and full-time defender to earner, allocator, and owner. Even if the returns are modest at first, the psychological significance is enormous. You stop seeing yourself as someone who only exchanges time for survival. You become someone who directs capital, however small the initial amount may seem. That identity shift is not cosmetic. It changes behavior. Investors monitor costs differently. Investors define enough. Investors care about systems. Investors understand that a dollar saved is not just stored effort, but future optionality. So, if you are not at 20,000 yet, how do you get there without turning the process into a self-punishment ritual you eventually abandon? First, stop treating your budget like a morality test and start treating it like an extraction report. Your mission is to identify vampire costs. These are expenses that feed on your income without giving proportional stability, health, meaning, or joy in return. They are not always obvious luxuries. Sometimes they are sneaky subscriptions, convenient spending driven by exhaustion, inflated phone plans, chronic delivery fees, insurance overpayments, unused memberships, late fees, storage units full of deferred decisions, and interest charges that quietly drain your future. Sometimes the vampire cost is a car payment that is really a status payment. Sometimes it is living alone in a neighborhood you cannot afford because you are trying to prove something to people who are not paying your bills. Sometimes it is being too disorganized to compare rates, negotiate utilities, or automate transfers. You do not need to eliminate all pleasure. You need to remove the expenses that are buying neither pleasure nor progress. Second, define enough. One of the reasons people fail to build savings is that they never decide what amount of consumption actually satisfies them. Without a definition of enough, every raise becomes permission to drift upward. Lifestyle inflation is not always dramatic. It often looks like slightly nicer everything. Nicer groceries you barely taste, nicer apartment finishes you stop noticing, nicer car features you forget are there. Nicer nights out you cannot remember 2 weeks later. If you do not define enough, your life will expand to absorb every gain, and your nervous system will remain fragile underneath a more expensive costume. Third, optimize the two giant levers first: housing and transportation. Most people will never save 20,000 through coffee cuts alone, and pretending otherwise wastes time. The fastest path is usually not heroic frugality. It is strategic restructuring. Housing is often the largest expense, so you need brutal honesty here. Can you refinance, renegotiate, relocate, get a roommate, house hack, or shorten your commute by moving closer to work and eliminating car costs? Can you move back with family temporarily if the arrangement is healthy and goal-directed, not indefinite and vague? Can you sublet, downsize, or stop paying premium rent for a version of your life you do not actually live? Transportation is the second major lever. A car can consume your income through payment, insurance, gas, repairs, parking, and depreciation all at once. If you can reduce from 2 cars to 1, trade down, eliminate a payment, or structure your life around public transit, biking or walking even for a season, the effect can be enormous. These decisions are not glamorous. That is precisely why they work. Wealth is often built through unglamorous corrections that nobody applauds in the moment. Fourth, automate the separation between you and your excuses. Set up transfers the day after each paycheck lands. Do not wait to see what is left. Nothing meaningful will be left if your spending gets first claim. You are not trying to out-argue impulse in real time. You are building a system that removes the decision from the battlefield. Fifth, increase income with the same seriousness you apply to cutting expenses. There is a limit to how much you can shrink your life before the process becomes unstable. Ask what skills, certifications, negotiations, side work, overtime bursts, freelance services, or job changes could add even a few $100s a month. A raise compounds. A higher base salary compounds. A better job compounds. For some people, the biggest saving strategy is not better restraint. It is finally leaving the underpaid role their scarcity mindset convinced them they had to keep. This is where the account becomes aggressive rather than defensive. A savings balance changes how you show up to opportunity because it changes what you can survive. If you have no buffer, every risk looks reckless. If you have a buffer, some risks reveal themselves as calculated. You can spend a few months learning a new tool, building a portfolio, interviewing carefully, or testing a small business idea because failure is no longer synonymous with immediate collapse. You can say no to a manipulative employer and yes to a temporary bridge plan. You can reject a predatory financing offer and wait for a better one. You can respond to life instead of flinching at it. That is why I want you to stop calling this money boring. It is not boring. It is concentrated optionality. It is compressed self-respect. It is the financial expression of a boundary. And yes, emergencies will happen. The car will break. The dog will need surgery. The water heater will fail. But that is not the highest purpose of this cash reserve. The highest purpose is that it prevents ordinary problems from hijacking your entire identity. It stops one event from turning into six. It keeps your brain available for strategy. And once you cross the threshold, protect the momentum. Do not celebrate by reintroducing fragility. Do not hit 20,000 and immediately upgrade your life so aggressively that you erase the neurological safety net you just spent months building. Maintain the buffer. Split your next dollars with intention. Keep a stable cash reserve appropriate for your life, then direct additional money toward retirement accounts, broad market investments, debt elimination where interest is punishing, and skills that raise future income. The point is not to hoard cash forever. The point is to use cash to create stability, then use stability to deploy capital intelligently. This is the sequence many people reverse. They try to optimize returns before they have emotional runway, and then one crisis forces them to liquidate, borrow, or panic. Stability first, then acceleration. Safety first, then scale. That is not fear-based thinking. It is structural thinking. You also need to understand the social dimension of this number. When you have no savings, other people can feel your dependence. Employers feel it. Salespeople feel it. Partners feel it. Family members feel it. Institutions feel it. Need has a scent. It changes how you negotiate, how fast you answer, what terms you accept, what disrespect you normalize. But when you have walking away money, your pace changes. You do not rush every decision. You do not chase every approval signal. You do not mistake access for opportunity. That is why a serious savings target upgrades more than your finances. It upgrades your posture. And posture matters because the world often rewards the person who can wait. The person who can wait gets better prices, better jobs, better timing, better decisions, better partners, and better terms. Waiting is expensive when you are broke. It is powerful when you are buffered. So no, saving is not deprivation in the way you have been taught to think about it. Deprivation is when your mind never gets to rest because every dollar is already assigned to some urgent repair of your life. Deprivation is when you cannot leave. Deprivation is when one mistake becomes identity threatening. Saving, properly understood, is the opposite. It is the purchase of your own cognitive freedom. It is the conversion of income into reduced panic. It is the deliberate construction of a brain state in which wisdom becomes possible again. This is why the 20,000 milestone matters so much. It is enough to interrupt the feedback loop between scarcity and bad decisions. It is enough to reveal that many of your so-called money mistakes were not proof you were defective. They were symptoms of being overloaded, underbuffered, and forced to operate inside a constant stress response. Once the pressure drops, your decisions often improve not because you became more virtuous overnight, but because your biology is no longer cornered. And that should leave you with a very sober kind of hope. Not fantasy, not magical thinking, not the promise that $20,000 solves everything. It does not. It will not make you invincible. It will not exempt you from bad luck. It will not turn life into a straight line upward. But it can do something even more important. It can restore your ability to think, choose, refuse, and act from a position that resembles adulthood instead of emergency. It can mark the point where your money stops functioning purely as a shield and starts functioning as a lever. It can be the moment where your wealth no longer grows only by subtraction, but by exponential acceleration. It can be the amount that proves you do not need millions to begin feeling the first real taste of freedom. You need enough runway to bring your nervous system back online and enough capital to let compounding finally stop whispering and start speaking in numbers you can feel. So take the numbers seriously. Make it concrete. Break it into monthly targets. Cut the vampire costs. Define enough. Rework housing and transportation. Automate the transfers, raise your income, guard the buffer. Then use the buffer to negotiate with the world from a place of calm strength instead of cortisol-driven fear. Calculate exactly how much you need to hit your $20,000 milestone today and redirect every spare dollar toward buying your brain out of survival mode.